edition, you don't see these options anymore. It will be grayed out. You only see assigned. Okay. So if you want to use dynamic user and dynamic device, you should have a premium license. Otherwise, you will be seeing this option grayed out. If you're seeing this option grayed out, what it means is you don't have a premium license. Okay. Right. So since we activated a premium license, right? So that's the reason we were seeing that those dynamic device and dynamic user options there, right? Now you see this. What is the license type? It got changed to. Okay. So now what do we do is let us try to. I haven't finished my discussion yet. Once we complete this, we will understand. Okay. Right. So let us create couple of users. Okay. So let us create couple of users. Right. So let us say user 1. Right. So I'll just go ahead and create them. Right. I'll also create one more user. So let us say user 2. I'm going fast here because we did see how to create the users in yesterday's discussion. Okay. Is this fine? Right. Hopefully that this view might be better. Are you feeling better now when it comes to screen visibility? Okay, thank you. Right. So now we have 2 users. Okay. So now let us go back to our group section and let us create a group. Okay. So let us say that scenario 1. Okay. So create a assigned group. Okay. With the name group 1 and add members to it. Okay. So we are going to go and create a group with the name called as a group 1 and add some members to it. Okay. Right. So how do we create a group with assigned group? So we go to this group section, add group or new group. Right. Now what type of group you would like to go with? Security group. Group name, group 1. Description of the group. If you have some description, you can put it. Now what is this membership type? Right. Membership type, what is that we would like to go with? Assigned membership type. Right. Now what you see here is owners. If you want to assign an owner to this group, who is responsible for the management of the group, you can do it. For example, there is an application team that is going to go and use this group for their requirement. And you can tag their manager or maybe their lead as an owner for this group so that he is responsible for the members of this group. And if required, you can also give him access to add and remove members from this group. So less management for you so that he can handle his group on his own. That can also be done. Okay. Right. So that is the purpose of the owners. The person, whoever is owner of this group. Right. So you can go and select his user. A group can be added to a group or a user can also be added to a group. So which means nested groups are possible here. Now what is nested group? A group in another group, which we call it as nesting, isn't it? Right? So but for this requirement, I am going to go and add the users that whatever we create, isn't it? Right? So go ahead and create your security group of membership type assigned. So whenever you go with assigned membership type, you manually add the members to the group. So let us wait for that group to get created and we will validate some of the settings of the group. Okay. So this is the group you created. It is a security group with membership type assigned. So if you go to the group itself, right? So you can also see the same properties here with the creation date and other stuff, members, right? Right. So the current members are listed here. You can go ahead and add additional members if you want to add a bulk of a huge number of users. You can also import the members by using a template, right? So if you have a huge list of users, put the user list in the template like what we had seen yesterday, right? You can download the CSV template, put the user details, and then import it. So all the members in that template will be added automatically, right? Okay. Can we validate who made this group? Oh, yeah, yes, you get those same logs, no, yesterday, right? The audit logs, right? Right. You can also go ahead and see the logs, right? Who did what, right? We added some members and so on. Same thing can be done. Okay. So you can add users using the bulk users using this template, or you can also go with PowerShell, right? That is also very much possible. Okay. So can we create a group with roles assigned? Yes. You can also assign roles or privileges to this group. Whoever is part of this group will get those privileges. Very much possible. Okay, right. Can we create groups, email? Okay, so this is not a mailing group. Okay, so this is not a mailing group. This is a security group. That's what I was saying, right? So this group is only to grant access, right? So you can create a group of that type in your 365 application. If you want to create, or DL kind of distribution list, call it as. If that is your requirement, you can use 365. Okay, right. Can we give a global admin to this group? Yes. Okay, so this group can get global administrator to manage the entire Azure Active Directory. That can be done. So if the group is having global admin privileges, all the members in this group will also have that privileges. Okay, right. Okay, so this is about your general group, right? So you can add the members, as somebody was asking, you can add roles, which means privileges, right? And you can also assign licenses to this group so that all the members in the group will also get the licenses. For example, you want to assign P2 licenses. So if I assign those P2 licenses to this group, all the members of this group will get those P2 licenses. Or maybe let us say you got 365 application licenses and you want to grant 365 application licenses to your users. Create a group, assign the license to the group so that the members of that group will get those licenses. Right? Right? Okay. Can we add more than one owner to the group? No, it doesn't. Okay. There's only one owner which you can add. Is this called as PowerShell? See, when you ask question, please be more clear. Okay. So, which is called as PowerShell? That I need to know. Okay. So, how to add a resource? You can add only members to the group. You can add only objects, not resources to the group. Okay. You can either add users, groups, or devices to the group. Nothing beyond that. Okay. Right. We will see that when we talk about what do we call it as RBAC. Okay. So we are not in the RBAC discussion. So let us not get there. Okay. Right. Now, so let us now see the second type. Group membership type, which is dynamic user, right? Now, so let us say, now this time I am creating one more group, okay? So now let us create one more group, scenario 2. So I'm saying create HR users and add them to the group. That's the first step. Okay. So create HR users, couple of users, and add them to the group. Right. And the group should be, right. Put it this way. Right. Create a dynamic user group. Right. With the name HR team and members and HR users should be automatically added to the group. That's our scenario number 2. Okay, so let us create couple of users, right? And what do we do is we create these users with department as HR. So we are going to go and put the department section of the user as HR, and we need to write some query so that the users will be automatically added to the group where is part of HR department. Okay, so let us create couple of users, HR user 1, HR user 2. Okay, right. So let us go to our Azure Active Directory. Right, go to your Azure Active Directory, go to the users section, create 2 users. Right, I'll call the first user as HR user 1, name of the user, and if you want to put first name, last name, you can do it. Right, now very important point that which we need to know is I am going to go and put the department here as HR. Okay, so which department he belongs to? HR department. That's why I am placing that value HR in the department section. Right, now I will create my second user. Let us call this user as HR user 2. Name of the user, first name, last name, and the department of this user is also HR. Right, you're getting what I'm saying? Right, so now what do we do is we create a dynamic user group, and to that group the users H user 1 and H user 2 should be automatically added, isn't it? Right, so now what do we do is let us go to the groups section. Right, go to the groups section, create a new group. Now this group is security group. What is the name of the group you are picking here? HR team. Description of the group. This group belongs to HR team. Right, this group belongs to HR team. Right, membership type. Right, what is the membership type you want to go with now? It should be not assigned, it should be what, guys? Dynamic user. So when you select dynamic user, do you see add users option here, which was there when we selected assigned group? Right, so when you change this to assigned, you'll get an option to add members. But when you change the membership type as dynamic user, you don't get that option of add members, rather you are getting an option called what? Add dynamic query. So you need to define a condition or query. Based on that, the objects will be added to this group. Okay, now let us hit this option called as dynamic query. I am hitting that option, dynamic query. So here you will write the condition. Okay, now concentrate little bit on this. Now here there is some section, a section called as property. Okay, so this is your user property list. A user ID can have these properties. A user ID may have country, a user ID will have department, a user ID will have city name, or maybe job title, and various other attributes of the user ID. Right? Right? So now I need to go ahead and make a query which basically says if the department of the user equals to what? Yes, in this case, HR. If the department of the user equals to HR, add the user to the group. Isn't it? Can I write multiple queries in one group? Yes, you can write it. You can also add, another query by using an expression. So this query, if the department equals to HR, and then you can write second query with and or operator. So you can combine multiple queries as well if there is a requirement. So in our case, what we want to do is, if the department of the user is HR, then we want to add the user to the group, right? So then, the moment you go ahead and this query and create this group, all the users, whatever you already have in your Azure, it will be validated. It goes and looks for those users whose department is listed as whatever is defined in this query as HR. If there is a user whose department is HR, that user will be added to this group automatically. You getting? So it is about the existing users. And it's not only for the existing user. Any new user you create, and if the department of that user is HR, he will be automatically added to this group. New users will also be added. If you remove the department of a user from HR and place it as a IT or whatsoever, the user will be automatically removed. So you need not have to manually remove or add users to this group. Based on the query, things will be automatically done. Okay, right. So let us go ahead and create this group. Right? So now understand the fact that whatever the properties you are seeing in that dynamic query, those properties are related to the user. If user object has got that property, right, then that property can be added in the query. Can I create a custom attribute to the user? You can do it. That is little advanced, but you can do it. I can create my own custom attribute to the user if there is a need. And I can use that to write my dynamic file. Okay, now, so this is your, what do we call it as group which we created, and what type of membership type it is? Dynamic. Okay, now if you go to this group, right, if you go to this group, if you go to this members section, right, so can I add users to this group manually? Right? No. Why? Because it is dynamic. Right? So since it is a dynamic, you cannot add members manually. Whatever the members added, they will be added based on the query you listed. Okay? Can I modify the query whatever I have? Yes, you can. So for this HR team, you can go ahead and modify the query whatever you already wrote. So how do I do that? In the group itself, you see this option, dynamic membership rules, which gives you what rule you have, and you can always go ahead and edit and modify the group. Okay, right. So you can always modify the existing queries whatever you already defined. Very much possible. Okay, right. So just wait for, let us quickly validate if these users are added. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 minutes to get them added. Right. So now your users are added. Can I remove these users manually? No. See, you can't. Right? Right? Now, if somebody goes and removes the department of this user ID and changes the department maybe to HR or whatsoever, let us say somebody changes this from HR to IT, then this user will be automatically removed from that, right? Automatically removed from the group. So if somebody creates a new user, let us say you are creating one more user, let us say HR user 3, right? New user, right? So this user, let us say his department is HR, he will be automatically added to this group. Right? In some time you will see this HR user 3 added, HR user 1 will be removed. Why? Because you changed the department of that user. Okay? Right. Couple of very important things. Okay? Now when it comes to assigned group, a group can be added to the group, which means when it is an assigned group, nested groups are possible. When it is an assigned group, nested groups are possible. But when it is a dynamic user or dynamic device group, nested groups are not possible. Only the users can be added or only the devices can be added to the dynamic groups, not another group. Okay, so that difference you should be aware of. So you can add only users to the dynamic user group and only devices to the dynamic device group. Okay, right. So I'll pause here. If you got any questions on the dynamic users or maybe the normal groups, we can pick. Okay. Can we change dynamic group to assigned? No, not possible. We cannot. Can we make a mandatory property on a user, for example, department? Where? Achha, if somebody should not be missing that property to be left blank. If that is your question, there is no option as such. There is no option as such. Yeah. Sometimes attribute value cannot be same HR. In that case, can we put star? No. So in that case, there are various other options also, right? So when you go to the query, that whatever you write, right? So you can go ahead and use a few other options here, right? So for example, the job title, right? So these are the only options you got, right? All or right, contains, equals to. So you may have to use one of these options, starts with or whatsoever, right? Okay. So only these things you can use, right? You're getting what I'm saying? Right? If that fits for your requirement, then yes. Okay. Right. Mandatory, I mean during the creation. So during the creation, you don't even get the some of the attributes. Some attributes are listed, but only those things that which are marked as star here are mandatory. I don't think there is an option here to enforce the other options which are optional. Okay, maybe I need to check if there is really something like that. Okay. Can you explain nested group? Nested group means one group in the other. You have group A and you are adding it to group B. That is called as nesting. Okay, adding one group to the other is called as nesting. So dynamic group also should have a P2 license for the group, right? Okay. So now a couple of things that which you should be aware. So to use the dynamic user property or dynamic device future or dynamic user future, so if you have P2 license, that is enough. How many P2 licenses you have, and that doesn't matter. So you got a P2 license, then you have this future enabled. That's how the groups part will work. It has nothing to do how many licenses you have. So the moment you got a P2 license or P1 license, you can use dynamic device and dynamic user group. And even if you got one P1 license or one P2 license, you can use this feature. You're getting? Right. What is the purpose of AND or? See, sometimes you may want to write a query where you may want to define multiple conditions. Right? For example, I'm going back to the HR team. Right? So now I want to write if the department equals to HR, and I want to only put those members who are managers. Right? So department HR, but there should be manager, which means I have two conditions here. So what I have to do is, I have to say if department equals to HR and, right, now job title equals to manager, then add. So both the conditions should be met. Then only that user will be added. So it goes and looks the user attributes, checks if the department is HR, checks if the job title is manager, then only the user will be added. So if one of these conditions should be met, then you go with OR. So it's general AND or operations, whatever we use or whatever we learned when we were learning at least some computer science terminologies, isn't it? Right? Okay. Nested means not merging one in the other. Okay, merging gives a different meaning. Can we use query for multiple addition of users in multiple groups? Yes, you can. Who is operator in the dynamic group? Where is that operator? Who is the operator in dynamic group? Which operator? This one. This is a condition, right? So equals to, not equals to, or whatsoever. Right? If you save this query, will you remove the existing users? Right? Yeah. So if you make any changes to this, the again validation will happen. Only those users that which are meeting this condition will be retained. Others will be removed. Yes, that's right. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. That's about the dynamic. What do we call it as? User group. Okay. Now, similarly, we can create a dynamic device group. Okay. So, similarly, we can create dynamic device group. Okay. Right. Let us create one dynamic device group. Okay. So, let us take this scenario 3. Right. Okay. So, here they are not users, but here they will be devices, which are registered devices. Okay, so you will have a registered devices. So where we will be creating a dynamic device group, right, with the name, let us say Windows 11 devices, right? Let us be that name and add all Windows 11 devices to the group. So in this particular case, if the device is registered with your Azure Active Directory, then the device will be added to the group. So you have the list of registered devices. If there are some Windows 11 devices which are registered to your Azure Active Directory, it goes and looks for all those Windows 11 devices and adds it to the group. Then how the devices will be registered and other things, that we will be discussing in the next class. Okay. So, but you can also register or join the devices to your Azure Active Directory. Okay. Right. So now let us look at the dynamic device group properties. Okay. Now, so same security group. Let us name this as Windows 11. right? And then description. The membership type, now it is what? Dynamic device. Now the query, whatever you write here, now is related to the properties of devices. Earlier, the query that whatever you wrote is by using the properties of the user. The earlier dynamic user, we wrote the query using the properties of the user. Here we use the properties or attributes of the device to add the devices to this group, right? Now, so go ahead and hit add dynamic query, right? So now if you look at the properties, whatever are available here, these are all device properties. Operating system version, operating system type, or maybe the display name, model of the device, various other attributes related to the devices. Right? So now you need to define a condition using the property or attribute of the device. Right? Earlier we use attributes of the user, now here we are using the attributes of the device. Right? For example, so let us say, yes, you can see there are different operating system types, right? It can be Android, it can be Windows, possible, right? Okay, right. So now let us say if the operating system, let us say version equals to, maybe let us say Windows 11, right? Add the devices to this group. Right? You can create a group like this. And what is the purpose of this dynamic device group? You can control all the devices, right? You can assign some licenses to the devices, and all those things are very much possible by using the dynamic device groups. Okay, right. Okay, now, so can you show the query once again? Right. So go to your Windows 11 group, go to the dynamic membership rules, and then you can find, you know, the attributes or properties here, operators and value is what you pick. Okay, right. Now, what are these dynamic devices? You see this devices option, right? If there are any devices which are joined to Azure Active Directory, they will be listed here. Okay, so there are devices. If they are joined to Azure Active Directory, you can see them here. Those devices are added to the, what do we call it as, the group. Okay, right. Okay. So this is about the dynamic device. Okay, so any questions on this we can take, otherwise I am done with this topic. Okay, can you tell the real-time corporate usage of the dynamic device group? So there are scenarios like, as I said, controlling the devices itself by setting some conditional policies, right? So those are the situations where we'll, or maybe you'll be using the same groups within your Intune solution. That can also be done. Okay. What is the difference between security and distribution group? So the security group is where you can grant access to the resources. Distribution is purely for mailing, right? How the devices get added? You wrote the query, no? Right? You wrote the query. If the query is met, the new device will be added. Are these devices part of the Azure resources? No, they are not part of the Azure resources. The devices should be registered with Azure Active Directory, right? So if they are registered with Azure Active Directory, they will be added. So there is a feature called as Azure AD join, which we'll be discussing in next week class. Yes, there is a feature called as Azure AD join, which we'll be discussing in the next week class, that you will understand how the devices will be listed and other stuff. Okay, right. Application update or OS patches update, can we use this group? If you are using Intune to update the patching, yes. Okay, right. Can we add a specific device? So why do you want to add a specific device when you go with a dynamic device, right? So whichever the device that meets a condition, that will be added. If you want to manually add the device, then you go with the assigned group. No, Why do you again want to go with this one? Where does the data for the query come from? Says OS information. So that is from the registered devices. No, you have this devices list. Right? You see this under your Azure Active Directory. You have these devices where you have all the registered devices. Right? From that list, it will be adding the devices. Okay. Can we update the assigned group to dynamic? I think I already answered that. No. Will it work for both on-premises? If you have AD Connect installed, you can also use this feature of adding devices. That can also be used. Okay. How many Azure AD partitions created? Like there is no partition here. Don't try to compare with the directory services. Okay. Can we authenticate these devices? Yes. If the user is Azure AD joined, if the device is Azure AD joined, all the users here, they can also log into that device. Okay. So wait for that till next class. Okay. Can we do OS updates and patches? Oh, yes. Okay. So if you are using Intune, you can do it. So we are slowly tracking, getting ourselves from the actual discussion. If you are using Intune, yes, you can. Okay. Right. Any other questions? Okay, so let us get into our next discussion, guys. So my request is, guys, stick to the concept whatever we are discussing. Okay, so if we move out of this, then we are having a difficult time in the last 3 sessions. Okay, that time you can't do anything, I can't do anything, we'll be short of time. So please be aware that the questions whatever are asked, please don't repeat it, right? And then try to stick to the content what I am discussing. Okay, some of the questions I did skip wantedly because those are all irrelevant. Okay, so try to understand that, please cooperate. Okay, so ask as many questions as you can the discussion what we are doing. Okay, let us not sidetrack ourselves. Okay, please understand, right? Okay, so now the next topic what we are going to talk is very important, which is multi-factor authentication, right? So MFA or multi-factor authentication, right? What is multi-factor authentication? What is multi-factor authentication? Why do we need it? Two or more ways of proving your identity, isn't it? Right? What does it bring to the table? Security, right? Okay, so all of us use usernames and passwords, isn't it? Maybe for your email system or your office laptop, whatsoever, right? But how safe your passwords are, right? So most of you use your, I mean, your spouse name or maybe your kid's name and the date of birth, and easy, dot test at the rate 123 or password at the rate 123. This is how we are used to have our passwords, isn't it? Because we don't like having a complex password and we don't want to remember, isn't it? So which means when you have a weak password, it is not only a problem for you, but it is a problem for your company as well, isn't it? So if your user ID is compromised, then your company data is also, organization data is also compromised, right? So then how does organizations make sure that the identities of the users are secure, right? So if you look at this discussion, whatever we did, right, with only passwords, and it is not really that safe, isn't it? Because we use dictionary words and there are multiple hacking tools using which you can easily crack the passwords as well, isn't it? So that's why apart from the username and password we regularly use, you are bringing an additional authentication solution, which we call it as two-factor or maybe multi-factor or whatever you call it as. So along with your username and password, you are using some additional authentication method which is bringing additional security to the environment, right? Which means more than one way of authenticating. That's what a multi-factor authentication is, right? Yeah, Facebook and various other applications to support, right? So then what does this multi-factor authentication has to do with our Azure Active Directory, right? So your users can be configured with additional authentication solution. Apart from the username password, you can use additional authentication solutions to secure the environment. Okay. So now let us understand some terminology here. Okay. So multi-factor authentication has got something which we call it as method, MFA methods. Right? There's something called as MFA methods. Right? So the first method is something you have. Right? Something, right? You have. Okay? Right. The second method is something you know. Right? Something. And the third method is something you are. Right? So these are the three authentication methods, right? A multi-factor authentication uses. And some of you might have guessed what each method is. It defines how you are authenticating. What is that you are using to authenticate? Isn't that's what a method is defining? So what is that something you always have using which you can authenticate? Yes. What is that you always have using which you authenticate? Username and password, isn't it? Username and password. That is the example, isn't it? Right? And what is that you know, and based on that you authenticate? So OTPs, isn't it? You get your OTP to your mobile, that which you know, and then using that you authenticate. So most of the time it can be OTP, one-time password. So this one-time password can be on your mobile, isn't it? Can be on your mobile, or it can be on your email, or it can also be on your authenticator app. How many of you use the authentication apps? Right? Most of you might be used these days. These are common solutions, isn't it? Authentication apps. Right? You get OTP on your authenticator app. Microsoft has got their own, isn't it? Microsoft Authenticator app. Right? And it can also be a notification on your app. Right? That is also possible. It can be an OTP on your app, or it can be a notification which you acknowledge it, which means you are the right person to get into the system. Right? Authentication app means it is an application, right, which can be installed on your mobile devices, where you get your OTP. Right? You might have seen these RSA tokens, isn't it? Physical tokens. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. Right? It's like RSA token, but this is a application installed on your mobile. Right? Okay. Right. The third method is something you are. Right? So what are the things that which will fall under this category? Biometric. Isn't it? Right? So fingerprints. Right? Or maybe face detection, or maybe iris detection, and so on, right? Various other methods, right? Okay. So these are the methods that which generally used, right? So something you are. It can be username, password, mobile name, password, right? Something you know, OTP on email or mobile or app and notification. Sometimes it can also be a call on your mobile, right? You can also use, right? So you acknowledge the call. Some authentication solutions will also support that. Okay, these are the general authentication, 3 authentication methods. Okay. Out of all these, what Azure supports, we'll see that. Okay. Now, how do we configure MFA on Azure, right? So, how do configure MFA on Azure? So, to configure MFA on Azure, there are 2 methods. Okay, so there are 2 methods. So, one is per user MFA. Second method is using policies. You can use policies to configure the multi-factor authentication. So which one is you recommended? Recommended is second one. This is the recommended one because less administrator activity. This is recommended. Okay. Now we'll see both of them. We'll see both of them so that you understand what are the challenges with the first one. Okay. Right. So let us first look at per user MFA. Okay. As it names, you configure multi-factor authentication for individual user. Right? If Vijay need MFA, Vijay user ID should be configured with that. Right? If somebody else require MFA, his user ID should be configured. So every user ID will be configured with multi-factor authentication. That is per user MFA. Whereas policy, you write a policy based whichever the user ID meets that policy condition, MFA will be enforced. Okay? Right. So let us first talk about per user, right? So in order to configure per user multi-factor authentication, so you should be going to your users section in Azure Active Directory. And there is this option, you see it, per user MFA, right? Per user MFA, right? So per user MFA, right? Now this is what when you click that per user MFA, you will be taken to this screen, right? And you see all your users, right? All your users here. And the multi-factor authentication status is disabled for all these user IDs, isn't it? It is disabled. If you want to enable MFA for them, you need to select the user and you need to enable them. You can select multiple users and enable. Right? So here in this case, you are selecting your users and you are enabling multi-factor authentications for them. Right? That's why we call it as per user MFA. So for example, I want to enable multi-factor authentication for this user 1. So I select that user and enable it. Isn't it? Right? So enable multi-factor authentication. Right? So now it says MFA is enabled for this user. But when I select this user ID once again, you also see an option called as enforce. The first step, what we did, enabled. Once you enable, you are also getting another option, which basically says that enforce. Now, what is this enforce? What does it mean? Right? Let us try to understand that, right? So when we say enforce, concentrate, okay? So there are some applications that doesn't support OTP. There are applications which doesn't understand OTP based multi-factor authentication. Example, your Apple email, and I think they fixed the problem with Outlook, but Outlook was also having a similar issue where the application with the application you cannot use the OTP. So those type of applications which doesn't support OTP based authentication, so they provide you an additional option which we call it as app password. So in case if you got some applications which doesn't understand OTP based authentication, you will be enforcing multi-factor authentication, which means it allows you to use something called as app password in place of OTP. So if this user is enabled with MFA, whichever application supports OTP, he will use OTP, no doubt. But if there are applications which doesn't support OTP, in that case, he use this app password along with the username. That is the purpose of enforcement. So in short, enforcement will allow you to use app password in case your applications doesn't support OTP based authentication. That is the purpose of enforcement. Right? So let us go and do this enforcement as well so that we can check what it is when we try to configure that. Right? Okay. So now this user one is configured with, what do we call it as, multi-factor authentication. So whenever this user logs into Azure environment, after you enable MFA, he will be asked to configure the multi-factor authentication. Right? So once you enable MFA for the user, next time when he logs in, he will be asked to configure things. Okay? So what do we do is, let us reset the password of this user ID, user1, and try to log into Azure environment with this user ID. Okay, right. Then how do I reset the password? I am on user1, reset password, isn't it? Reset password, right? Right. So this is the password that which it gave to you. Okay, right. Let us get into private browser mode. Right. Let us log into Azure portal using that user ID. Okay, right. So copy the user principal name. Right. Okay. So before that, I missed one part. Right. So let us assign license to this user. Okay. So I'm going to go and assign a license for this user, premium license. Okay. So I'm going to this user section. I'm selecting user one. And you see this licenses option. Go to the licenses section. Assignments. What is that you would like to assign? I would like to assign P2 license. Right? Select the P2 license. And you can leave this default, whatever. Right? So this is how you can assign a Azure Active Directory license to an individual user. If you want to assign to a group of users, create a group, put all the users in that group and assign the license. That can also be done. Okay, right. Why does it fail? Let us try to understand this. License cannot be assigned to the user without a usage location specified. So this user one doesn't have the location specified. That's the reason it failed. Okay. So let us go ahead and assign a location to this user. Okay. Right. Azure Active Directory, users, user one, edit user properties. Right. Somewhere it should be, yeah. Under the settings, there is this location. Because it is not set, you cannot assign the license. Okay, so let us set this one. Okay, say India. Right, save this. Okay, right. So now I can assign a P2 or P1 license to this, right? So we have P2 licenses, we are assigning, right? User 1, licenses, assignments, assign what license? P2 license. Save it, right? Like this, you can assign licenses to the user. Similarly, I'll assign license to my user 2 as well. Before we assign, let us edit the user and set the location for this one as well. So under the settings of the user, you see the location. Set the location of the user, save it, and then you can assign the license. Okay, assign licenses. Right. Save. Okay, so the usage of multi-factor authentication require a P2 license. That's what the question comes, isn't it? So then why Vijay is assigning a P2 license to these guys, right? Now understand that there are multiple methods which are supported on Azure. Okay, there are multiple methods or multiple multi-factor authentication methods supported on Azure, right? We were discussing this, isn't it? What methods? This method anyway is there. In the second method, if you doesn't have premium license, only app notification is supported. If you don't have P2 license, only authenticator app notification is supported. If you want to use OTP based authentication and other stuff, you need a P2 license. I'm repeating again. If your user has got a free license, he can only use notification method on authenticator app. But if he got P2 license, he can use OTP method as well. That is the difference. Since I want to demonstrate the OTP based authentication, somebody was asking me yesterday, we were assigning P2 licenses to our users. Otherwise, you can still test MFA, no doubt. But the only demonstration you can do is using the authenticator app. He cannot use OTP based authentication. Right? You're getting what I'm saying? Okay? Right. Now, what do we do is, let us try to log into this. Okay, so let us try to log into this. Okay, I think we need to reset this again. I just missed that. Password. Okay, user 1. Right, reset password. Right, that is the reset button to get a new password. This is a password. Let us copy the username, and I'm in incognito mode. Right, enter the password of the user. Right, login. Right, what does it say? Help us to protect your account. Now it is asking him to configure the multi-factor authentication details. Right, now say next. Right. So this is how your user will be asked. After you enable MFA for a user, user will be prompted to configure it. Now user has to configure this from the next time onwards. After he configure this, whenever he log in next time, he will be prompted to use the second factor authentication. But he has to set it up, isn't it? That's what he is asked. Right? What does it say? Microsoft Authenticator. Right? If you want to use Authenticator app, you use this method. No, you want to use some other method, then you see this option. I want to set up a different method. So by default, it is asking you to use authenticator app. If you want to use different method, hit this. Okay, I want to use different method. What method you want to use? Phone or authenticator app. So what are the methods available here now? Either phone or authenticator app. So the second method what you can use here on Azure is OTP on mobile or OTP on authenticator app or notification on authenticator app. You don't have OTP to email option here. And you don't have even this option as well. So the multi-factor authentication solution available on Azure are password, along with it OTP to mobile or OTP to the authentication app, or notification to the authenticator app or call to a mobile. These options are there. Now you should be choosing what should be your second method among these. So that's why it is prompting you here as a user when you try to configure, it will ask you, boss, whether you need second factor authentication using the phone or using the authenticator app. If you go with phone, either you get SMS on the phone or you get a call. That you will be asked to choose. If you go with the authenticator app, either you get an OTP on authenticator app or notification on authenticator. These are the options available. Okay. So now for this demonstration, I'll go with phone. Okay, because it is easy for me to demonstrate. For me to install the authenticator app and those things, you can do it. It is very simple, easy one. You can do it on your own, right? But we'll go with the phone authentication here. Okay, right. So now this guy says, along with the username password, I want to use phone authentication, right? So then it is asking you, boss, enter your phone number. So he enters his phone number, whatever it is. Now to add this number, he should be getting some text, right? On the number, whatever is given here, he should enter that text so that the mobile number will be added to the second factor authentication. Right, guys? Okay, so I'm waiting for the code to be, sent. Yeah, I got it. So I'm entering the code, right? So whatever, 583163, 5831, 58316, right? So now this number will be added to the authentication list. So next time onwards, when you try to log in, a OTP will be sent to this mobile and he will be using that for second factor authentication. Okay. Now, so and what is this app password it is asking? Because we enforced it, isn't it? We enforced it, right? So say next. Now it is asking you, enter app password name. So let us say I'm entering the app password name as Vijay. Okay, so Vijay Vemula, right? And when you say next, it generates a password for you. So whenever there is an application which doesn't support OTP based authentication, you use this username and this password for second factor authentication. And this is only for those applications that doesn't support OTP based authentication. Okay, right. So I'm going to go and hit done. Right. So you successfully configured your multi-factor authentication. Your user is all set to use MFA from here on. Okay. So it is asking you to change the password. Press change it. This is the initial password, isn't it? Because you did reset the password, obviously it will ask you for change of the password, right? So now this user is all set to use MFA from next time onwards when he log in, right? Let us validate that. Okay. Now let us log out with this user ID. And try to relog. Right? Try to relog. Right? What is that? This one, isn't it? User one. Right? Enter the password. Hit sign in. What does it say? Text to this mobile. Right? Select this option. And you should be getting a text on that number. Right? Which I got, which is 180012. Verify. Right? This guy is into the system with multi-factor authentication. Okay. Now, before I look at the questions, let me explain you a few more. Those things will be answered. Some of the questions will be answered. Okay. Right. So can the user change from mobile-based second factor authentication to app-based authentication? He can change. Okay. Right. So for example, this user, if you want to change, user has got the user properties in the portal, isn't it? So he hits this and he sees this option, view account, right? View account, right? Under the view account, he can always change the things, right? In case if he changed his mobile number and so on, all those things can also be updated. He has to go to this security information. So under the security information, he get an option to change the things. Okay. Right. You see this? Add authentication method. He can delete current one. He can add new authentication method. No, he has changed his number. He can delete it, add it, or he can change it. All those things are right. Very much possible. Okay. Right. So let us pick some questions. Okay. So if you feel that your question is not answered, please ask. Okay. Can you please provide an example of which application doesn't support OTP? I think I already gave the list. I'll not be able to demonstrate that amount. It is very tough for me to simulate that or demonstrate it because I don't have those applications. Okay. How to clear this MFA? Can global admin change the method of the users? Okay. See, how to clear this MFA? If you as an administrator, you can always go to the user. Under the user section, for you as an administrator, you get these authentication methods, right? You can always make changes here. If you want to revoke multi-factor authentication or reinforce the registration, all those things can be done, right? If there are already some sessions, you can revoke them. If you want to force the user to re-register, you can do that. Yes, as an administrator, you can do it. Okay. Revoke multi-factor authentication session you use most of the times when the devices are compromised, right? Otherwise, you don't use this. And maybe your devices are compromised, you want to reinforce, revoke and then enforce the registration, you can do that. So these are the options you got as an administrator. Okay. Can we keep MFA to a specific group only? That can be attained using conditional access, which we'll be discussing. Okay. And if you want to use biometric, biometrics are not supported straight away here. But I think there are solutions which you can integrate, right? Which you can integrate. That is possible. If the app password is the app password dynamic, no, it will be same. If you want, you can change it, right? If you want, you can change it. So that again can be done from the user settings itself, right? Wherever user logged in, from the user session, you can set the app password as well, right? From here, that is possible. Okay. Right. What else? When we assign the MFA to the user, will the user get automatic email? So once you configure or enable MFA for the user, next time when user tries to log in, he will be asked to configure. He don't get any email as such. Okay, he will be asked to configure. Okay. Can we integrate any third-party MFA? It is possible. You need to look at the vendor-specific documentation. Yes, it is possible. You can do that. If user doesn't have P2 license, if user doesn't have P2 license, can the user add to the dynamic group? Yes. Dynamic group addition can be done whether user has got P2 license or not. Right? Even a free user can be added to the dynamic group. So the usage of the dynamic group requires a P2 license. You should be having at least one P2 license. That's what I was saying. Right? Okay. Any other questions? I didn't get your question, Palvender. Maybe put elaborate questions. Okay, integrate by using app. I didn't get that. Okay. Anyway, right? Can we restrict user to only authenticator app? That's what I was trying. I'm going to explain now. Okay. Now let us discuss few very important and useful settings, and then we'll go with a break. Okay. Right. So somebody was asking, how did you navigate to multi-factor authentication page? So you go to the Azure Active Directory users, and then you see this for user MFA. That's what I used. Right? You will be navigated to or taken to this screen. Right? Okay. Now, so somebody was asking, right? So I think Raj is asking. Okay. Can we enforce user to use only one authenticator method? My company uses only OTP based authentication, or my company uses only uses authenticator app. I don't want to allow my users to use OTP based. Can we restrict? Yes, you can do that. Okay. Now if you look at this, right, there is this option called as service settings. See this? Service settings, right? Under the service settings, just waiting for that to populate. It is little slow for some reason, right? You see this option, service settings. Now here you see an option, right? Verification options. So by default, these methods are available. Which methods? Text to phone, notification to the mobile app, verification to the mobile app or hardware program. But your company uses, let us say, only notification to the app. Then you can deselect the other options. Your users will be getting only this option to configure. No, your company uses only OTP or SMS to the mobile, select only that option. You can always have those things configured. That can be done by using the service settings option. And this can also be attained. Okay, so I'll talk about that. Okay, so these methods are used here, right? Now, if you look at this, right, trusted IPs, right? There might be some IPs from where, when the user access, you don't want MFA. Example, if the user is logging in from Office, you want to bypass the multi-factor authentication, right? You want to bypass multi-factor authentication when user logs from Office, I'm sorry. Right? So you can put the IP address range here. For example, your company uses, let us say 192.168.0.0, maybe /24 or maybe 22, whatever. All that range will be excluded from multi-factor authentication because they will be listed as trusted IPs. That can also be bypassing MFA for a range of IP addresses can also be done. Okay. So this can also be accomplished by using conditional access policy. Exclusion of MFA for certain set of IP addresses can also be done by using conditional access policies. Okay, right. So that's all I have for the first part of this MFA discussion. which we discussed for user MFA. Okay, so we'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll see how do we enable MFA using policies. Okay. So call to phone option is not available for MFA. So this option is available when you go with SSPR, self-service password reset. Can we assign here only a particular IP? One IP can be assigned, right? All you need to do is you can define an IP address. But how many IP addresses you add? It is very tough, right? That's why we generally define the range of IP addresses using a CIDR block. Okay, right? Yeah. So we'll pause here. We'll go for a break. In the meantime, if you got any questions, we can take.